Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Big Blend Radio's second Wednesday Books and Authors Show with Books Forward. We're your hosts, Nancy and Lisa, and today we're excited to welcome debut author Cathy A. Lewis, and she's joining us to talk about her historical fiction novel. It's called The Road We Took, 4 Days in Germany, 1933, and it looks into Hitler's deadly plans 9 years before the start of World War II and the Holocaust. That's something you don't really hear about. We always kind of focus on what happened during the Holocaust, but not actually what was happening, what brewed it all together. The book comes out on February 15th, 2022. And of course, you can pre-order. So I encourage you to go to Cathy's website. It's Cathy A. Lewis, and that's Cathy, C-A-T-H-Y. And Lewis is L-E-W-I-S. So CathyALewis.com. And welcome to the show, Cathy. How are you?
Hey, it's so great to be with you both today. I'm doing great today.
That's awesome. It's awesome. I think this is real. I know Nancy's reading the book, and so I'm just going to say there's one thing. This is truth. We really don't read that much, especially historical fiction, about the right before World War II and how that started, unless you're really reading about Hitler and his whole big, plan, and studying that kind of thing. You don't really hear stories about that, really.
Well, exactly. And most people don't know the history of what happened. Whenever you mention, Hitler, it's immediately their minds go to September 1939 when Poland was invaded. And they believe that that was the starting point, when actually the starting point was when he became chancellor January of 1933. January 30th. And prior to that, he had already been head of the Nazi Party for many, many years. If you know your history, know that he staged that beer hall putsch in Munich in 1923 and was arrested for participation in that. And then while he was imprisoned, he dictated the book, which became Mein Kampf, to Rudolf Hess, who was imprisoned with him. And so when they were released in 1925, that book was published and circulated all through Germany and Vienna, Austria. And the book became almost like the Bible to the people of those regions. So they were really indoctrinated and firmly believed in all the premises that Hitler put forth in Mein Kampf. That Germany was oppressed, and the oppression was because of the Jews, and World War I was because of the Jews, and the Treaty of Versailles was because of the Jews. And so that animus was already propagated with those people. So when he took over power, when he became chancellor in 1933, the people were already on board with him, and the Nazi Party grew exponentially from that point on, where citizens were just yes, because they believed that he was going to create this perfect utopian world for the German people and rescue them from this plight that was forced upon them, all at the hands of the Jews. And so that the hatred was already in place, and he started those evil plans against the Jews and anyone really that didn't fit that Aryan ideal right from the get-go. It wasn't, with the implementation of the final solution in 1941. No, this started in January of 1933.
Wow.
I wonder how he was brought up to come to be such a monster.
That's a good question. And I'm sure there's historians that have done that work, looking into his life and his background. I do know that he had a almost unhealthy attachment to his mother and had some real serious issues with that relationship, and was very emotionally tied to her. And when she died, he blamed the doctor, who was Jewish, for her death.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Huh. Wow. Oh, that is kind of trippy.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So I want to go into Tom family. This actually, the whole book idea wasn't this from going through your dad's, like his book, his mementos, his journal. Like you found like a bag of stuff,
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had this little suitcase in my possession since 1995 when my dad passed away. But I'd always been working like a dog all the time in the restaurant business. And then I moved to Nashville in 96 and opened a restaurant, was working 90 hours a week, and just didn't really have the time to devote to give it a thorough going over. And so when my surgery for ankle fusion was planned, and the doctor told me I was going to have 6 months off, can't walk for 6 months, I thought,
Wow.
uh-oh, I'm going to need something really creative to do during that time period so I don't go bonkers.
Yeah.
And the thought came to me, now is the time to investigate that suitcase. So when I opened it up, and it immediately had a flashback to childhood memories of my dad showing me all the things that were in this little suitcase, talking about his trip through Europe. So the suitcase came as a result of a 6-week trip he took through Europe with his Boy Scout troop on the way to the 4th World Jamboree being held in Godolo, Hungary. Now, this happened in the summer of 33 at the height, the pinnacle of the Depression. And it still blows my mind to think that my grandparents, this was a family of 6, sent my father on this trip through Europe.
Wow.
And with $50 in his pocket.
Wow.
I mean, that just blew my mind. I couldn't believe that, but that, like that, that was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
But he was 16, almost 17 at the time. He traveled through and he kept a journal and wrote faithfully every day in his journal about what he saw and what he experienced. And as I'm going through all of his mementos and recalling conversations with him we had as children, as when I was younger, and my sister and brother, and he would tell us stories about his Boy Scout troop and about the trip. I had forgotten completely about the journal. And when I opened up the journal and started to read it, it just really shook me up, because he wrote about these 4 days that he spent in Germany and what he saw. Because after the Jamboree was over, they came through Germany on the way to the port at Bremen to take the ship back to the United States. So they spent 4 days in Germany. And he saw things that we now know were in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles, that he saw armaments and trucks and tanks, and they had amassed soldiers. And he saw this huge parade of like 100,000 soldiers. And they were in Nuremberg and saw a rally of 40,000 Hitler youth. And while he was in Vienna, he didn't run into, but a Hitler youth approached him and said that he was a former Boy Scout, but Hitler had issued an edict that no Hungarian or no Austrian or German boy would attend the Jamboree. And it was compulsory for all boys to quit all their other involvements in groups and organizations and join Hitler Youth. They had to.
Wow.
And if they didn't, they would be severely punished, probably put in a concentration camp. So he was speaking with this boy and had quite a conversation with him. And at the end of it, my dad wrote in the journal, and the boy's name was Wolfram Wolfton. And he wrote, I found him to be a fine fellow. And I thought, oh my goodness, I wonder if that fine fellow, what my dad didn't know, 10 years later, he'd marry a Jewish immigrant whose family, extended family, not her parents, but her aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, were all murdered by Nazis in Baranovice, Poland. And I wondered if that fine fellow was involved in any of that.
Wow.
And at that point, I thought, I need to write about this.
Wow.
And so I called a cousin of mine who I'm very close to and was telling her this story. And she just admonished me. She said, you owe this to our family. You have to write the story. You have to come up with a story. I said, yeah, but there's just so much that not enough to fill a whole book. And then she said, well, have you ever heard of the word fiction? I was like, well, yes. She said, so you can tell some of the stories, but do it through characters in a fictional story. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And that's how my book came about.
Wow. And have you written before?
No.
Wow. Because you really
Never.
write well. I mean,
Nancy's
it's amazing.
loving this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love
she
your
said
writing
it's
style.
yeah, she says it's a rough, it's this the whole topic,
It's a
what happened is sad.
well, it's a touchy subject for sure.
It is. And I did copious amounts of research. I did about 3 months of research before I even began to write, because I wanted to get the facts straight. I wanted to convey the message that hatred is something that cannot be contained. And when it gets a spark, it's sure to turn into a fire unless it's extinguished. And I wanted to illustrate through the book how quickly this fire of hatred spread. And it's so interesting because we almost see this kind of thing being repeated today.
Right.
There's so much division in our country, and there's so many different ideologies out there, and people, being very, adamant about what they believe and their stance and things. And it's almost like a precursor, to similar to what happened in Germany and in Europe. And so I feel, for the sake of my relatives that died and perished in the Holocaust, that we can never let people forget how quickly hatred spreads, and how we all have a responsibility to do our part to ensure that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, we've lived in several different countries, some with dictators and some with sort of democracies in Africa. And the hatred thing, from my personal experience, is always based on fear.
Absolutely.
And the only thing that I can see that can fix that is education. And
yes.
It's so important that people not separate themselves from other people who just happen to be different than them.
Absolutely.
They need to go to lunch together. They really need to hear the differences from an aspect of, hey, this is interesting, I could learn something, instead of from, if you're not like me, you're out.
That's right.
It's so important. And, the whole Hitler thing and what he was able to do, you're right. Just recently in our political history of the last few years, it's very clear to me what could almost happen if we don't get our wits about us.
I believe it started really about longer than that. I believe it started about 15 years ago, really.
Oh, really?
Where there became a great division of ideologies, where there was a separation of, if you're not with us, you're against us. And I think that was a real starting point, and it just continued to accelerate, really reaching a peak these last few years. And we, for the sake of our civilization, we really have to guard against that, because only destruction can come from it. And that's a really good point. These things are absolutely fear-based. Hatred is fear-based. What people are afraid of and what they don't know. And when people are different, it gives them cause to be afraid, which, like you said, if you just went and had lunch and sat down with them, you'd find out that you had a lot more in common than what you didn't. And unfortunately, the Jews throughout civilization, I always use the example of the burning bush. You're familiar with that, right? Right. So Moses is standing before the burning bush. And I always use the burning bush as an example of the nation Israel, persecuted yet never consumed. And so, the Jews being looked at as completely different from the rest of the world throughout history. You can see it where they were they were blamed for so many things, like the Black Plague, which was
Mm.
spread by rats, but that was, blamed on the Jews, that they were tainting the water. And there's been
Right.
horrific stories over the years told. And when people are marginalized and made to fit a caricature of someone's imagination, it takes on a life of its own, where people become afraid of that. And
Yeah.
so the Jews were so villainized, and because their practices and their orthodoxy and their religious practices were so different than everyone basically around them at that time, they were viewed as bad and something to be afraid of. There were stories of that the Jews would kill Christian children and take their blood to make their matzah for their
Oh my gosh.
for their Shabbat.
Seriously?
Right? Seriously,
Seriously?
But these were stories that were told over history, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But people bought into this stuff because of, like you said, lack of education.
Mhm.
And education is really the key. And so my book, the intention is to educate people into what can happen when hatred gets out of control.
And, I know when I first took Lisa to Africa, we lived with a couple of different tribes here and there. My parents went crazy. They did, oh my God, how could you do that? And we were just fine. It was a
That's
different,
so fascinating.
it was a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, Lisa, did you ever feel scared?
No, even, you know what, even in South, when we lived in South Africa, it was after Kenya. We ended up in part of the riots that were happening.
Yeah.
It was right at the point of overturning the apartheid,
Mm-hmm.
the stupid, thing
Yeah.
that that's just crazy. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like I, when we first got back to this country, I was just like, whoa, America seems to still be just as bad as South Africa, except for
Mhm.
South Africa wrote it down. That's the
Mhm.
only
Yeah.
difference
They made it a
in
law.
the stuff that's going on, and America's not really done any better work since we've been to this country, and we didn't do it, man. But it's when we ended up in riots and being in the middle of them, being like in Grahamstown, we were there with Nancy, had a magazine there, and and I was working for her as teenager out of high school, and a couple of my friends, and I remember we were in not Grahamstown, excuse me, it was the Karoo, up in the Karoo, Nancy, remember?
Mhm. Yeah.
Crawfordnet.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there was a riot in the street, and it
Yeah.
was kind of a march. It's not all
It was a
riots. So there's
march. It
I should
wasn't a
really just
riot.
say there's a difference.
Mhm.
There's a huge difference between a march and a riot.
Yeah.
And the riots come after the marches, typically in our life. And I
Yeah.
remember being in that, and you just got in it and crossed the street through it. Nobody heard us. We ended up in a takeover of a shopping mall where
That
they
was
took over
interesting.
the mall, and the mall got shut down with everybody in it, which
Mhm.
is scary. But we were in a restaurant in the mall, and we just turned around and had another glass of wine and enjoyed it. But nobody heard us.
Yeah.
And there was distraction,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody hurt us. And
Mhm.
we've been in some other a ton of situations,
Mhm.
but they
Mhm.
never really truly hurt us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so that fear, we are human beings, and
Mhm.
we should be scared, I suppose, when there's a riot. I don't know if we just got thick-skinned about stuff, but I
I
just
don't-
never had a fear to the people. I had a fear of the police in South Africa, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because
Serious fear of the police, because they,
Yeah.
when Nelson Mandela came in, he fired 80% of the police,
Mhm.
and that was
reason.
all colors,
Mhm.
and there was a good reason. I mean, you couldn't walk home from school without a police
Mhm.
van, a pickup
No,
truck coming down
totally,
and trying
totally corrupt.
to pick you up as a young girl.
Mhm.
And they raped
Wow.
women, they
Yeah.
did bad things. And so it was it's an interesting thing, but it is all about fear. All of it
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
fear. And what happened in South Africa, what happens in this country, what happened in Europe, and we're still going through this. I don't understand how we get past it, but I do believe the power of the pen
Mhm.
and the power of music, the power of food, something you know very well, helps us get past that kind of fear. Don't you
Yes.
see that in restaurants too? I mean, as a
Oh,
chef,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Because it transcends it,
Mhm.
and food is the one common denominator of
Mm.
something that we all need. And that there can be breaking of bread,
Mhm.
a meeting of minds, and a gathering of people's hearts together over a meal. It's amazing, if you could just do, I've thought about this before, having this whole thing called one meal at a time,
Mm.
and
Ooh.
providing a meal, bringing together people that are absolutely opposed, diametrically opposed in their belief systems, bringing them together, having a meal, and sitting at a table and talking and finding commonalities
Wow.
versus differences.
That
There is an actual nonprofit that does that. And I
Really?
can't for the life of we interviewed them when we first started I mean, it's like 15 years
Wow.
ago.
Uh-huh.
They came on our show and everybody had to be a different denomination
Uh-huh.
of beliefs or cultures, different,
Mm-hmm.
and it was about, I think it was more on the religious side,
Mm-hmm.
which is all connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
But people would have these meetups and discuss things and share what's common, go what's not common. Oh, for the life of me, because it was really fascinating. And they said it was about people all coming together to understand. And I think we need to do it even for what's going on in everyone, whether if you're gay, you're straight, you're
Mhm.
not gay. I mean, if you're bi, if you're a lesbian, everybody's got all these things too. I think
Mm-hmm.
that has to happen too.
I
I
think
believe
so too.
we have to all just break bread together. But then the power of the pen, like I was saying, is also so powerful. Writing
Mm-hmm.
fiction, which can later be also turned into a TV series or a movie,
Right. Mhm.
right? And that music tells the story of history. It's
Mm-hmm.
very real because musicians tend to write what's happening now. You
That's
can
right.
believe music more than you can the news
That's
half
right.
the time. But the same thing with historical fiction, when you actually have the info, like you're talking about getting things right, doing the research, but having a story to it so that people can grasp it. If it's a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of dates, no one's going to grasp it.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes. And so it had to be something tangible that
Right.
people could connect to. And so I very carefully crafted my characters that way so that they would represent, kind of different viewpoints of the time period.
Mm.
And they're not necessarily the viewpoints of today, but it was important to, have different points of view within the book,
Sure.
to communicate those things. I just had a thought and it just totally ran away from my
I
brain.
didn't do it.
Who took that?
Yeah.
There's a
Sometimes-
cat running around somewhere.
It's a black cat.
With a big question mark.
Yeah. Sometimes I think, people forget what the difference between animals and humans are. Like sometimes in the animal world, if you're the smallest of whatever species, the
Mhm.
others turn on you. Or maybe
Mhm.
you were born with the white streak and none of the others have a white streak. So now
Mhm.
they oust you.
Mhm.
That's in the animal world. And then I look
Mhm.
at what we do and I'm like, are we
Mhm.
so different? Because weren't we supposed to be better than that? Isn't our education supposed to lift us above that animal level?
Well, and we're also created. We are the one species that has free will choice.
Right.
We are able to make free will choice. Animals can't.
Yeah.
Unless
And so
Hitler's
that's what's
involved.
supposed to set us above. And
Unless Hitler comes in and you meet up with Hitler, then you don't have free choice anymore.
you don't have any kind of choice. One
Yeah.
funny thing I point out in the book is, how Hitler would wax on and on about, this ideal Aryan and how they were virile and big, strong, blonde hair, blue eyed men and all of this, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at him and all of his henchmen, Goebbels, Himmler,
Mm.
Rudolf Hess,
They're
all of
little
them,
short
Hitler,
people.
they're all little short men with black hair and black eyes. It's like, did anybody ever give these guys a mirror? Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Oh
Did
my
you
gosh.
look in the-
Right? Ironic?
Wow.
Again, that was his whole circle was fear-based
Yes.
Yeah.
because, birds of a feather flock together.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
so there you are. So you could look.
Wow.
You can see the lack of personal identification, what makes you
Yes.
different from the
Mhm.
person you're following. Not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have your own mind, or did you let somebody else substitute your mind with their mind? You
You know,
really?
but I think when people are, Germany was oppressed after World War
Mhm,
One. The Treaty of Versailles really did crush them
mhm.
as a nation, and that's the sad thing about when wars like this happen. It's the innocent people, it's the citizens that end up having to pay the greater price, because I guarantee you that the people that were in charge of Germany after World War One, even though it was what was it, the Weimar Republic,
Mm.
and it was supposed to be run like a democracy, but there were so many limitations placed on them by the treaty that they suffered so much economically, and they were hurting as a nation, and they were also starving.
Mhm.
And so here comes this guy who makes all these claims and promises about what he's going to do for Germany and make them the greatest nation in the world, and he's going to bring back money and wealth and all of these things for the people, and the
Oh,
people are
make
going to
Germany great again.
make Germany great. Exactly. It's
Oh,
frightening, but
mm.
you could see why people would kind of get on board with that in a way if you were raised in that kind of atmosphere. I hold no animus against Germany or the German people.
Oh,
I
you
mean,
can.
for
Yeah.
what took place, all you can
No.
do is just really have a broken heart for what they had to suffer through, because so many people, innocent citizens, died at just,
For no reason.
It
no
was a major
reason.
brainwashing.
It was a major brainwashing.
It really is. And you see that in Africa, same thing.
Well,
We
it's
talk about,
fear-based.
the African people
Again,
are
it's
amazing,
fear-based.
but it
Mhm.
was also they would the dictators would go after the
Mhm. Yeah.
young kids
Yeah.
and turn them into like little warriors
Yeah.
Soldiers.
and little soldiers and
Mhm.
that's when the men take over away from the women, because the
Mhm.
women are, you don't mess with the women, you never,
Mhm.
no. No.
They'll
But
poison you.
I mean, it's pretty brutal, um and they get brainwashed at a very young age to become and get these little tastes of power
Mhm.
and
Right.
cheered on. The
Mhm.
more bad stuff you do, the more you're applauded, and
Mhm.
it's a really vicious cycle, and that is this fear. I mean, and there are women who do this kind of thing too, make no mistake, especially
Yeah.
in the world of drugs and drug
Mhm.
Mhm.
dealings, and
Yes.
there are some very good female criminals,
Yes.
really good. And so never underestimate what a woman can do in the skills of organizing. And so it's not just men, but it just feels like that major power hungry kind of thing. But it's really, I mean, for you going through all of this and writing it, finding this, I mean, this is some historical, this is stuff that should be in a museum, almost like what your dad had. That had to be kind of
Wow.
putting
Mm.
yourself in what your dad was going through.
Mhm.
Was
Yeah,
that,
and
yeah.
I put together a very cool Shutterfly book, photographed every single piece of memorabilia, put the date of the journal. I synchronized the whole thing, put together this
Cool.
fabulous Shutterfly book, had 15 of them published through Shutterfly, sent each one, they cost like $55 each to produce, but sent one. I had a friend who was very well connected with the Boy Scouts of America, sent a book to the very top echelons of the Boy Scouts organization.
Mm.
I got one email that said, send your belongings to this address. Thank you.
What?
Right. I was like, you
What?
can imagine the words that came out of my mouth. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they
What?
had no interest. All they wanted was my stuff. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about the story. They just wanted the stuff.
Or
That's all
maybe
they
they
cared
wanted to
about.
get rid of it.
I don't
Hide
know.
it.
Possible.
Hide it. Hide it.
Possible. Yeah, I've told friends if I end up missing one day and
Look at
and
the
the and the and the suitcase is gone, you'll know who did it. But
Well, I don't
but
know. The Boy Scouts reputation has taken a bit of
it has
smacks lately,
it
hasn't it?
really has, and it's too bad. But
Yeah.
I even called the Museum of American History, and uh, I did my due diligence to try to get this stuff into a museum, and no one was really interested. So
Wow.
I thought, the heck with you,
Crazy.
I'm going to write a book.
Yeah, I think, and here it's okay. So,
Hmm.
on your website and blog, because in everyone, you can go to cathyaLewis.com. You can be, posting that kind of thing for all of us, right? That way.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely, I do. And I tell stories, and I try to blog twice a month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for me, because I'm busy cooking and I'm
Mm.
involved in other charities and things, 2 blogs a month is pretty good for me.
Mm. And yeah, everyone really go to her blog. It's on her website. You can find the link at the bottom of the page. And yeah,
They can
wow,
sign up too. They can sign up, and
yeah.
they'll get it all updates, recipes, writings, musings, all of those things will come directly into their mailbox. They just have to sign up, and then when they get the link that says confirm your email, that's essential. Confirm your email, you will automatically be added to the list.
Cool.
And all the cooking too. I mean, you are, a chef, a personal chef now. We've run restaurants, cooked as a personal chef and catering, and for celebrities, musical celebrities. Everyone go on the website. You'll see, which is, amazing work, and a lot goes into it. And I know before we recorded, we were talking about how hard it is, the restaurant world, the food industry,
Hmm.
and now it's also changed. I mean, everyone's
It
got
has.
dietary issues now
Yes.
with, I mean, everything. It's like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, here's your carrot stick. Sorry, I'm now allergic to carrots. I mean,
Right.
someone's going
Exactly.
to be allergic to carrots somewhere in the world at
You
this point.
think?
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
But we're all like, what have we done to our food system? But going back to, you're putting recipes on, which all look fabulous, and I'm really hungry now. Looking at your website while we're talking, I'm like, dude, that looks really good. What when there's something really magical about cooking, where you have your recipe, your formula, but then there's this magic that happens where it's like, I'll just do this over here a little bit and tweak this over there, and it becomes
Mhm.
something new. And so when you were writing the book, did that kind of skill of writing recipes go into the creative side, but also knowing, like, if you bake, you can't mess with the measurements, right?
That's right.
Versus
That's right. Because
cooking.
it's you're doing chemistry now. And chemistry is a lot different. It's all about cause and effect. If
Mm.
you do this, this is what happens. If you
Yeah.
don't do this, then this will happen. So
Mhm.
it's cause and effect. But working as a chef really did prepare me to write the book, because there's a process I go through. Say I'm designing a menu. I create a menu. I do the research for the recipes, source the ingredients, write the prep list, and then execute the dish. And I found that same process with writing, where I do the
Mm.
research, write the outline, write the chapter. And so it was just kind of a fascinating discovery that there's this application of the same skill set used
Mhm.
between 2 distinctly different professions,
Oh wow! So it's what's the thing you were talking about? When we were talking about Nancy
Mise en
cooking at the.
place.
So it's the same thing when you did your research. You needed to have all that
Yes.
Yeah.
there.
Yes, you got it. Exactly. It's your
Otherwise,
mise en place. Get your mess in place.
you're looking for the baking powder.
That's
I like
right.
that though. Well, see, I like that because I'm a Virgo and I'm a real pain in the butt about, like, ding, 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 everything in order.
Yes.
And then and then I'm also super creative. But if I have it all lined up, then I feel like, okay, now I'm just going to mess it all up. I'm going to get my crayons out and I'm coloring over the lines because I got it all there. I can do it,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is a freedom in having everything in place.
Yes.
It's like you don't have to have that nagging thing at the back of your brain.
You're
Right. It's all ready.
Yeah, my grandmother taught me you can break the rules, but only once you know them.
That's exactly right. And
Yeah.
this is what I would tell young chefs and young cooks all the time, is that you follow those rules until you understand how this recipe is put together, backwards, forwards, upside down, inside out. Once you understand it, then you can break the rules.
Yeah.
Like making risotto, for example, just for example. But, you know, now that you understand the very premise of the recipe and how it's supposed to come together, then you can, if you have to make changes, you can make changes to it. But
Yeah.
I believe in though staying with the integrity of the recipe as much as possible, because you do know what your end result is going to be.
Yeah.
And one point, and I say this often, I think it's my refrain, is that I became a chef way before it was cool to become a chef. You know, I graduated from the CIA.
She did it before the Food Network.
In 1981. Yeah. And I'm writing a blog actually about my 1 year teaching during the time the Food Network was all the rage. And I had all these students, brand new students in my class, first day of class. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give them a little bit of a litmus test here. I'm going to see just how much the Food Network has had an impact on their lives. Why do they want to become chefs? Is it because of love of food, love of people, love of service, or is it because they think it's cool? I said, okay, how many of you want to be a celebrity chef? And out of 25 people, 15 people raised their hand. I said, get the hell out of my classroom. You have no business being here.
See?
You can't believe the looks on their faces. Oh my gosh.
But you know what? I think it's harder to be a celebrity chef or to be, you know, what you do, cooking for celebrities, because it's like, woo, you got to have your stuff together, man. It's like, that is I mean, it's like, not only because there's so much attention to detail in food and serving food, but, and then all the different things that go on, but, and there's a relationship with that too. With
Well,
the
that's
people
the
you're
thing.
cooking.
The people that I cooked for, I was already had a relationship with and was close with. And so one actress I traveled with many times to many movie locations, and was with her and her husband at the time. And you know, when you live with people like that, when she was doing a Broadway show, she rented this huge house in Alpine, New Jersey, and we lived together there on and off for like 4.5 months.
Wow.
And you know, when you live with people like that, you know, you're like used to seeing each other looking like a mess in the morning, and you're okay with it. You know, it's not like, I mean, nobody pulls any punches. Everything's just like above board.
Yeah, I
Of
think
you, and you do it.
exactly. I think that's, you know, with us, that intimate part, it's about getting down and getting real. You know what I mean? But
it is totally.
It's about getting real and having that relationship, and it's not about the glitz and the glamour. It's not all that. And you know, it's getting it's part of a relationship to make something happen. And I think what you've done in writing the story and you know, putting your family history there and really bringing this to the forefront at a time that I think is very crucial is commendable. And you know, right on, man, you wrote a book. I mean,
that's cool.
And fiction. It's not just, you know what? I know it's, you know, people write business books, nonfiction books, and it can be really difficult because you need to get that over. But writing fiction, and Nancy was, you know, Nancy, you're digging it. She's, you know,
it's awesome
to do historical novels and get it right. That's a challenge. And obviously you do know relationships to make it work on the pages. I don't think you can write about people unless you know people.
Agree. And I've been observing my whole life.
Yeah.
My whole life I've spent observing people.
You could watch them in a restaurant. Do they really like that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, do you really know which way to swirl your wine? Are you just saying, oh, look at the legs on that? Oh, we're not supposed to say legs anymore.
That's right. That's right. It's all about the terroir.
Yeah. Right. Oh my gosh. Well, I know there's more coming down the road for you in the written word, right?
Yes. Cool. I have a couple things in the works. May take a little bit longer than this book did, but maybe not. It just depends. You know, I'm quite busy these days. I don't have the luxury of having 6 months off at a time, but I should be careful what I wish for. There could be another surgery coming my way to fix yet another part on this old car. The spirit is willing, but the body is very weak.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see, what's down the road, but I will be writing. I can guarantee that I will be writing.
Well, I
Awesome.
hope all goes well with your health because
you.
health is very important.
Mhm.
And, but it does give you a good excuse to write. But
It absolutely does.
I say
absolutely
that, I
does.
mean, I want you to be healthy and happy and not and be in pain. But
Yeah,
we
me
do
too.
want the next thing coming out. But everyone, you can keep up with Cathy. Go to CathyALewis.com, and that's CATHYA, and then Lewis is LEWIS. And the book again, The Road We Took, 4 Days in Germany, 1933. And it comes out February 15th, 2022. And you can, of course, go pre-order it on Amazon, all those great places, and go right to Cathy's website. And you can do it on bookshop.org, I bet, because you know what? They support independent bookstores. And I know, Cathy, you've got independent bookstores that you're working through, right? With your books too.
Parnassus in
Yeah.
Nashville. Yes. And, that's Ann Patchett's bookstore.
Mm.
Author Ann Patchett.
Very cool. Very
Mhm.
cool. Whatever we can all do to keep these bookstores going, it's
Yes.
important. They're important like libraries are important.
They absolutely are.
And they have events. And it's just, when you go in a bookstore, they're dangerous. Nancy and I are really bad in bookstores. Put us in a nursery, a plant nursery, a bookstore, anything with music. And that's when the
There
money,
you go.
that's
Yep.
when the bank account, it's just like we should walk in and go, here's the bank account. Just take it and we'll take your store.
Exactly. Well, Parnassus is a fabulous bookstore, and their the link to their website actually is where you can order the book is on my website.
Perfect.
And you can even order a book personally signed by me if you order it before the publication date of February 15th. So if
Perfect.
you want me to sign a book for you, order it through Parnassus.
Okay. Go through Parnassus because, again, local bookstore, independent bookstore.
That's
Yay.
right.
We love it. Thank you so much, Cathy. It has been a true
Yeah, it was
pleasure. And
awesome.
we hope we get to chat again.
I hope so too. Lisa, Nancy, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Good. Awesome.